The voice came at 3:47 in the afternoon on an ordinary Tuesday, and it spoke every language on earth at once. I was standing in line at a coffee shop when it happened. That's the part nobody believes, that the most important moment in human history caught me buying an overpriced latte I couldn't really afford with my earbuds in, half listening to a podcast about nothing. There was no warning before the warning. No ships in the sky. No lights. Nothing. Just an ordinary afternoon and then a voice, and then everything was different forever. The voice didn't come from a speaker. That's the thing I still can't explain, all these years later. It didn't come through the shop sound system or my phone or the TV on the wall. It came from everywhere and nowhere, inside my own head and outside it at the same time. And I knew instantly, the way you know a thing in a dream, that everyone was hearing it. Every single person on Earth. All 8 billion of us, at the exact same instant, in whatever language lived in our own minds. And the voice said, "People of Earth, you have one solar day. In one rotation of your world we will arrive to render judgment. You will be measured as all young species are measured and found worthy of the stars or found wanting and quietly ended. There is nothing you can do to prepare. There is nothing you can do to prevent it. We tell you only so that you may spend your final day as you choose. This is your one warning. Choose well." And then it was gone. And the coffee shop was silent. And I looked up, and the barista had dropped a cup, and it was rolling on the floor, and nobody was moving to pick it up, and every face in that room had gone the same shade of gray. And I understood that I had not imagined it, that it had really happened, that a voice had just told the entire human race it had one day to live. Let me tell you what happened in that day, because it wasn't what anyone expected. It wasn't what the voice expected either. That's the whole story, really, that the ones who came to measure us had measured 1,000 species before, and thought they knew exactly what one final day does to a people, and Earth showed them something they had never once seen in all their long history of judging the young worlds of the galaxy. My name is Danny. I want to be upfront that I'm nobody. I wasn't a scientist or a soldier or a leader. I was 31 years old. I worked in a warehouse. I had a small apartment and a cat named Miso, and a life that was fine, mostly ordinary and unremarkable and fine. I'm telling this story not because I did anything important in it. I didn't, but because I was there on the ground among the ordinary people, and the ordinary people are what this story is actually about. The leaders and the scientists did their part, and I'll tell you about that. But the thing that mattered, the thing that changed everything, happened down where I was, among the regular people, in the last day. So let me put you there, in that first hour. Because that first hour was the worst, and if you understand the first hour, you'll understand how far we came. The first hour was chaos, pure, undiluted animal chaos. 8 billion people had just been told simultaneously in their own heads that they were going to be judged and possibly exterminated in 24 hours, and the human race did exactly what you'd expect. It panicked. The coffee shop emptied in seconds, people just running, though there was nowhere to run to. I stood on the sidewalk and watched a city lose its mind. Cars abandoned in the street. People screaming, weeping, calling everyone they loved. Some running toward home, some running away from it. All of them running, because when the animal in you is that afraid it just wants to move, even when moving is pointless. I saw a man on his knees on the pavement praying. I saw 2 strangers holding each other and sobbing. I saw a woman standing perfectly still in the middle of the chaos, staring at her phone, and I realized she was looking at a photo of her kids. I saw the worst of us come out too, a store window smashed, someone grabbing what they could, because some people, when the end comes, decide the rules are over. It was the first hour, and it was ugly, and if the aliens had judged us in the first hour, I think we'd have failed. I think we'd have deserved to fail. We were at our worst in that first hour. Frightened animals, all 8 billion of us staring at the end. But the thing about a day is that it's long. 24 hours is a long time, long enough for the first hour to pass. And what came after the first hour, that's the story. I need to tell you about the voice and who was behind it, because it took us a while to understand, and you deserve to understand it going in. They called themselves, insofar as they called themselves anything we could grasp, the arbiters. They were old. Not old like a species is old, but old like a mountain is old, old past the point where the word means anything. And they had a role in the galaxy, a role they had held for longer than humanity had existed as a species. They were the judges of young worlds. Here's how it worked, and it's cold, and it's terrible, and I want you to sit with how terrible it is. The galaxy, it turned out, was full of life. Full of it. Young species were arising all the time on world after world, reaching toward the stars. And most of them the arbiters had learned across their unimaginably long existence. Most young species were dangerous. Not evil exactly. Just dangerous, driven by fear, by hunger, by the desperate scrabbling survival instincts that get a species from the mud to the stars. Instincts that don't switch off just because you've built spaceships. A young species loose in the galaxy, carrying all that fear and hunger and violence out into a peaceful ancient civilization, was a plague waiting to happen. Most of them, given the power of the stars, would use it to take, to conquer, to burn. The arbiters judged them. Before a young species got far enough to be a threat, the arbiters came and they measured it and they decided, is this species safe to let into the galaxy? Or is it one of the dangerous ones, one of the ones that will bring fear and violence and death out into the peaceful dark? And if it was safe, they let it live, let it rise, welcomed it eventually into the wider community. And if it was dangerous, they ended it. Quietly, painlessly, they said, before it could become a threat. A mercy, they called it, and maybe it was from where they stood. They had ended a great many species. They believed it was necessary. They believed they were the thing that kept the galaxy safe, the gardeners who pulled the weeds before the weeds could choke the garden. And the measuring, the judgment, it hinged on one thing, one test. The arbiters had learned over their long history that you could tell everything you needed to know about a young species by one simple, terrible experiment. You told them the truth. You told them they had one day left, that judgment was coming, that there was nothing they could do. And then you watched what they did with that day. Because a species that has one day to live and knows it and can't do anything about it, that species shows you exactly what it is. All the masks come off. All the civilization, all the pretense strips away, and you see the naked truth of what a people are underneath when hope is gone and the end is certain. That's what the final warning was. It wasn't a courtesy. It was the test itself. The last day was the exam, and the arbiters had watched 1,000 species take that exam, and they knew all the ways it went. They thought they knew all the ways it went. They'd never met us. Let me tell you how the ways it usually went, because the arbiters told us afterward, and it's the thing that makes what we did mean something. Most species, given their final day, did one of a few things. Some collapsed entirely, dissolved into pure panic and violence, turned on each other, spent their last day tearing themselves apart, proving in their final hours exactly the dangerous nature the arbiters had come to check for. Those species were the easiest to judge. They failed obviously, spectacularly, confirming that they were exactly the kind of fearful, violent thing that should not be let into the galaxy. Some species spent the day in despair, just lay down and gave up, waited for the end in paralysis, in grief, in the collapse of everything. Those the arbiters judged as weak, as lacking the vital force a species needs to survive in a hard galaxy, and they ended them too, though with less certainty. And some, the rare ones, the ones that passed, some species spent their final day in dignity, made peace, held their loved ones, faced the end with grace and courage without turning on each other. Those species the arbiters judged worthy because a people who can face the end with dignity, who don't dissolve into violence when hope is gone, are people safe to let into the stars. That was the passing grade, dignity in the face of the end, grace under the ultimate pressure. It was a high bar, and few species cleared it, and the ones that did earned their place among the stars. That was the whole range in the arbiter's vast experience. Panic, despair, or dignity. Fail loud, fail quiet, or pass with grace. 1,000 species, across an unimaginable span of time, and they all fell somewhere on that spectrum. The arbiters had seen every variation. They knew exactly what a final day looked like. And then they gave the final day to Earth. And Earth did a fourth thing, a thing that wasn't on the spectrum, a thing the arbiters had never once seen in all their long history of judging the young worlds. We didn't panic, well, we did for the first hour, and we didn't despair, and we didn't just face the end with quiet dignity either. We spent our last day trying to take care of each other. I know that sounds small. I know trying to take care of each other doesn't sound like the thing that would astonish an ancient race of galactic judges. But you have to understand what it actually looked like, on the ground, and why it was so different from everything they'd seen before. After the first hour, after the panic burned itself out because panic can't sustain itself, it exhausts you and then you have to do something else. After the first hour, something started to happen. And I watched it happen on my street in my city, and later I learned it was happening everywhere, all over the world, all at once. People started helping each other. Not in some grand, organized way, in small ways, in the ways that were right in front of them. The man who'd been praying on the pavement got up and started helping an old woman who'd fallen in the chaos. The store that had been looted, the owner came out, and instead of raging, he started handing things out, just giving away his whole inventory, food and water and blankets, because what was the point of owning anything now, and people might as well have what they needed for the last day. The coffee shop I'd been standing in reopened within the hour, and the barista who dropped the cup started making free coffee for anyone who wanted it, and people came and sat and were together, because being alone seemed like the worst possible way to spend the end. I saw it everywhere I looked once I knew to look for it. Strangers checking on strangers. People going door to door in apartment buildings, making sure no one was alone, making sure the elderly and the sick and the frightened had someone. The animal panic of the first hour gave way to something else entirely, a kind of fierce, tender, desperate care, the whole human race turning toward each other in the dark, deciding without anyone organizing it, without anyone deciding it, that if this was the end, then the way to meet it was together, taking care of each other, all the way down. That's the thing the arbiters had never seen. They'd seen species face the end with dignity, alone, each individual meeting their own end with grace. They had never seen a species that, faced with certain extinction, spent its final hours not on its own dignity, but on each other's comfort. That, it turned out, was a thing that had never happened before. In 1,000 judged species across an unimaginable span of time, no species had ever, when told it was about to die, turned its final day into an act of collective care. We were the first. And I was there for it, down on the ground among the ordinary people in the last day of the world. And I watched my whole species, which had been at its ugliest in the first hour, become something in that day that I hadn't known we could be. Something I'm not sure we'd ever fully been before, because it had never been asked of us all at once like that. Let me tell you about the rest of that day, because it got more remarkable as it went, not less. And by the end of it, we had shown the ancient judges of the galaxy a thing that made them do something they had never done in all their long and terrible history. I want to tell you about the people I met that day, because the story of Earth's last day isn't really one story. It's 8 billion stories, all happening at once, and I only saw a handful of them, but the handful I saw, I've carried ever since. After the first hour, I did the thing I think most people did. I went to find the people I loved. My phone barely worked, the networks were overwhelmed, everyone on Earth calling everyone at once, but I got through to my mother finally, and she was calm, calmer than me, and she said, "Come home, Danny. If this is it, I want you here." So I started walking, because the roads were impossible, walking across the city toward my mother's house, and it was on that walk that I saw the day change. I saw a group of teenagers, the kind of kids you cross the street to avoid on an ordinary day, all attitude and noise. I saw them carrying an old man's groceries, walking him home, joking with him, keeping him company. I saw a woman in a business suit sitting on a curb with a homeless man, sharing her lunch, the two of them talking like old friends. I saw a restaurant that had thrown its doors open, the chef cooking everything in the kitchen, all of it, giving away the finest meal of his life to anyone who walked in, because why not? Why should good food go to waste on the last day? I passed a hospital, and this is the one that got me, this is the one I still think about. The hospital was fully staffed. More than fully staffed, there were more medical people there than usual, because doctors and nurses who were off duty had come in. On the last day of the world, with 24 hours to live, doctors and nurses had left their own families and come to the hospital to take care of strangers, because the strangers were sick and someone had to. I stood outside that hospital and I watched people walk in to spend their final hours caring for people they'd never met. And I had to stop walking for a minute, because I couldn't see through my eyes. That's who we were that day, not all of us. There was still ugliness, still fear, still people who spent the day badly, and I won't pretend otherwise. But the overwhelming thing, the thing that swelled up and became the character of the whole day, was people taking care of each other, turning toward each other, deciding, 8 billion times over in 8 billion small ways, that the way to face the end was together, and that the last thing they wanted to do with their lives was to make someone else's ending a little less lonely, a little less frightened, a little more held. The leaders did their part too. I learned about this later, but I want to include it because it matters. You'd expect maybe that the governments of the world would spend the last day the way governments spend everything, in panic, in blame, in desperate, useless scrambling, maybe in secret plans to save themselves. Some of that happened, I'm sure. But the thing that actually happened, the thing that became the official character of humanity's last day, was different, and it started with a broadcast. A few hours into the day, the leaders of the world, not one of them, but many of them, coordinating for the first time in history with a speed that only the end of the world could produce. The leaders of the world did something unprecedented. They got on every channel, every frequency, every screen, and they spoke to humanity together. And they didn't offer false hope because there wasn't any, and they didn't offer plans because there weren't any. What they offered was the only thing left worth offering. They told people how to spend the day. We cannot save you, they said in essence in 100 voices across 100 nations. We cannot save ourselves. There is no plan, no weapon, no escape. We will not insult you with false hope, but we can tell you this. We have this day, this one last day, and how we spend it is the last choice we will ever make, and it is entirely, completely ours. No one can take it from us. So we ask you, we beg you, spend it well. Spend it on the people you love. Spend it forgiving what needs forgiving and saying what needs saying. Spend it being kind, because kindness is free and it is the best of us, and there has never been a better time for it than now. If these are our last hours, let them be our finest ones. Let us go, if we must go, as the best version of ourselves. That is the one thing they cannot take from us, how we choose to be at the end. Let us choose to be good. And here is the thing that I think is the true heart of the whole story. People listened. The whole world listened, and the whole world more or less did it. Not because they were ordered to. You can't order 8 billion people to be good. It's not possible. They did it because it was already what they wanted to do. The leaders didn't create the thing that happened that day. They just named it. They gave voice to a thing that was already rising up out of the ordinary people all over the world. The same thing I was watching on my walk across the city. The turning toward each other, the fierce tender care, the collective decision to meet the end as the best of ourselves instead of the worst. The arbiters were watching all of this, every bit of it. I understand now that they had eyes everywhere. That from the moment the warning went out, they were observing Earth completely, watching how the human race spent its final day, gathering the data for their judgment. They watched the first hour, the panic, the ugliness, and I imagine they nodded to themselves, thinking, yes, here it is, another young species dissolving into fear, another dangerous one, this will be a simple judgment. And then they watched the first hour end. And they watched the second hour and the third, and they watched the panic give way to care, and I think I know because they told us afterward. I think it confused them, because it did not fit. It did not fit anything they had ever seen. They had a category for panic and a category for despair and a category for dignity, and what Earth was doing fit none of them. Earth was not panicking anymore. Earth was not despairing. And Earth was not facing the end with the solitary dignity of the species that passed their test. Earth was doing something else. Earth was, with its last hours, taking care of itself. All of itself. 8 billion people turning toward each other in the dark. The arbiters, I learned, actually convened. In whatever way such beings convene, they stopped and conferred, because their observers were reporting something that broke the model, and beings that old and that certain do not like their models broken. They watched more closely. They looked for the trick, the exception, the thing that would make Earth fit back into a category they understood. Was it organized? No, that was the strangest part. It wasn't organized. It was arising spontaneously, everywhere from the bottom up. 8 billion individual choices somehow adding up to a single collective act of care. Was it performance? Were the humans doing it because they somehow knew they were being watched, being tested? No, the humans didn't know about the test, didn't know the final day was an exam, thought the end was simply certain. They were being kind to each other for no reason at all, for no advantage, with nothing to gain and no one making them and no hope of it changing anything. They were, as far as they knew, absolutely doomed, and they were spending their doom taking care of each other anyway. That the arbiters could not comprehend. In all their long history, they had never seen a species do a thing purely because it was good with nothing to gain at the very end, when gain was impossible and hope was gone. They had assumed, their whole philosophy assumed, that when hope is gone, the true nature of a species is revealed, and that the true nature is always underneath, the fearful scrabbling survival thing that they existed to guard the galaxy against. Strip away hope, and you see the animal. That was the whole basis of the test. And they stripped away Earth's hope, and underneath they did not find the animal. They found 8 billion people making free coffee for strangers and carrying old men's groceries and leaving their families to tend the sick and giving away everything they owned so that someone else's last day might be a little softer. They found at the very bottom of us, when everything else was stripped away, they found kindness. Not dignity, not grace, kindness. Active, warm, foolish, magnificent kindness, given freely for nothing at the end of the world. They had never found that at the bottom of anyone before. Let me take you to the end of the day, because that's when it happened. That's when the thing changed that the title promises you. By the last few hours, the world had gone quiet. Not the quiet of despair, a different quiet. The quiet of people who had made their peace, who had said what they needed to say, who had gathered the ones they loved and were simply being together, waiting, holding on to each other in the dark. I made it to my mother's house with a few hours to spare. My sister was there too, and her kids, and a couple of neighbors who didn't want to be alone. And we did what everyone was doing all over the world. We sat together. We ate a good meal. We told the old stories, the family stories, the ones that make you laugh and the ones that make you cry. We held each other. We said the things you say when you might not get another chance to say them. My mother, near the end, said something I've never forgotten. She said, "You know, Danny, I'm not as afraid as I thought I'd be." And I asked her why. And she said, "Because look at us. Look at everyone. If this is how it ends, with everyone being kind to each other, everyone taking care of each other, the whole world turning gentle all at once, then maybe we were better than we ever gave ourselves credit for. Maybe this is who we really were the whole time underneath, and it just took the end of the world to bring it out." She squeezed my hand. I'd rather go out like this, with all of us being good to each other, than live 1,000 years the way we usually are. Whatever they decide about us, I think we should be proud of today. I think today we were the best we've ever been. And outside, the last hour of humanity's allotted day ticked down, and all over the world, 8 billion people held each other in the gentle dark, and waited for the judgment to come. And then at 3:47 in the afternoon, exactly one solar day after it had first spoken, the voice of the arbiters returned. And what it said was not what any of us expected. And it was not, I learned later, what the arbiters themselves had expected to say when they first arrived to judge us. Because Earth had changed something in them too. That's the part of the story nobody tells right. We didn't just pass their test. We changed the ones giving it. The voice came back the same way it had come the first time, everywhere and nowhere, inside every head on Earth at once in every language. But it was different this time. I noticed it immediately, and later I learned that everyone had noticed it, all 8 billion of us. The first time the voice had been cold, flat, ancient and certain and utterly without feeling, the voice of something that had said these words 1,000 times to 1,000 doomed worlds. This time the voice was not certain. This time the voice, and I don't know how else to say it, because it was the voice of a being older than our species. This time the voice sounded shaken. It said, "People of Earth, your day is ended. We came to judge you as we have judged 1,000 young species before you. We told you that you would be measured and found worthy or found wanting and ended. We told you there was nothing you could do. And in that, we told you the truth. There was nothing you could do to change our judgment. The test was never a thing you could pass or fail by trying. The test was only this, to show us with your final day what you truly are." A pause, a long one. And when the voice came back, it was slower, and it was struggling, and I understood I was hearing something that had never happened before, an ancient certainty coming apart in real time. "We have judged 1,000 species. We know the shapes of the final day, the panic, the despair, the dignity. We have seen every way a people meets its end, and from those ways we have always known, with perfect certainty, which species to welcome and which to quietly end, so that the galaxy remains safe from the fearful, violent nature that lives at the bottom of the young. That has been our purpose since before your world had life upon it. We are the ones who look at the bottom of a species, when hope is gone, and see the truth of what it is. And we have never, in all our long history, been surprised by what we found there. Until today. We stripped away your hope," the voice said, "as we strip away the hope of all we judge. We told you that you would die and that nothing could prevent it, and we watched to see what you are underneath, when the masks of civilization fall away. We expected, as we have always found, to see the fearful animal beneath, the scrabbling, violent, self-preserving thing that all young species hide beneath their fragile civilizations. That is what is always there at the bottom. That is the thing we exist to guard the galaxy against. It was not there in you. We stripped away everything, and at the bottom of your species, in your final hours, with nothing to gain, and no hope of reward, and no knowledge that you were even being watched, we found you taking care of each other. We found 8 billion of you turning toward one another in the dark. We found you giving away everything you owned so that a stranger's last hours might be gentler. We found you leaving the ones you love to tend the sick and the alone. We found you choosing freely, for no reason and no advantage, at the very end of everything, to be kind. We do not have a category for this. In 1,000 judgments across a span of time your minds cannot hold, we have never once found kindness at the bottom of a species. We have found courage, yes. Dignity, yes. But those are things a species does for itself, to meet its own end well, to preserve its own honor. What you did was different. What you did for each other. You spent your last and only day not on your own dignity but on one another's comfort. And that, the voice faltered again, that is a thing we did not know a species could be. And then the arbiters said the thing that changed everything, the thing the title promises. The thing I have carried in my heart every day since. We came to judge you, the voice said, and you have judged us instead. For we look now at what we have done across all our long history, and we see it through the light of what you showed us today. We have ended 1,000 species. We told ourselves it was mercy that we pulled the weeds before they could choke the garden, that we kept the galaxy safe from the violent young. And perhaps, for some of them, it was true. But you have made us ask a question we have never asked in all our existence. How many of them, how many of the 1,000 species we ended, how many of them, if we had given them not one day but a lifetime, if we had helped them instead of judging them, if we had believed they could become something better instead of assuming they could not, how many of them might have become what you are? How many gardens did we call weeds and destroy, because we only ever looked at species at their most frightened, and never stayed to see what they might grow into? We do not know. We can never know. That is the weight we must now carry, and it is a heavy one, and you have placed it upon us, and you were right too. Because a people who would spend their last day taking care of each other are not a people who should be judged and ended by anyone. They are a people who should be helped, cherished, given every chance to become the fullest version of what they already are. And if that is true of you, then it was true, perhaps, of others we did not spare. And we must live with that. We, who thought ourselves the wise judges of the young, have been taught wisdom by a species we came to exterminate, on the last day we thought it would ever have. The voice was quiet for a long moment, and then it said the words that ended the judgment and began everything else. You are not found wanting, people of Earth. You are found to be something we have no word for, something better than worthy. And more than that, you have changed the ones who came to judge you. From this day, we will judge no more young species by their final hour. We will not strip away hope and measure the animal beneath. We will do instead what you have taught us to do. We will help them. We will stay. We will believe they can become something better, and we will give them the chance to prove it, the way we should have given it to all the others, the way you have shown us every young and frightened people deserves. That is your doing. That is what your last day did, not just to your own fate, but to the fate of every species that will ever be judged after you. You have saved worlds that do not yet exist. You have saved them by being kind, on the day you thought kindness could not possibly matter. Your judgment is ended, your world is safe. And the galaxy is changed because 8 billion frightened mortals given one day to die chose to spend it loving one another instead. Live people of Earth, rise to the stars. You have more than earned them, and carry this with you always as the truest thing about yourselves, that when we took everything from you and left you with nothing but each other and the certainty of the end, you turned to each other. That is who you are at the bottom when everything else is gone. Never forget it. It is the most precious thing we have found in all the long ages of our watching. And then the voice was gone, and it did not come back. I don't think I can describe what happened next, the moment the world understood that it was going to live. It wasn't like the first hour. The first hour had been chaos, animal panic, the worst of us. This was the opposite. This was, I stood in my mother's house with my family, with the neighbors who hadn't wanted to be alone, and for a moment nobody moved, nobody spoke, because we couldn't believe it. And then my sister started to laugh, this incredulous broken laugh, and then she was crying, and then we were all crying and laughing at once, holding each other. And outside I could hear it starting, a sound rising up across the whole city, across the whole world. The sound of 8 billion people realizing at the same instant that they were going to live, that their children were going to live, that the world was going to go on. But here's the thing. Here's the thing I need you to understand. The thing that's the real point of all of it. We didn't celebrate that we'd survived. Not mainly. That's not what the joy was about. The joy was about what my mother had said hours before when she thought we were all going to die. Maybe this is who we really were the whole time underneath. Because that was the gift the arbiters had accidentally given us. They'd shown us the bottom of ourselves. They'd stripped away everything, all our hope, all our masks, all our ordinary distracted selfishness. and forced us to see what was actually there underneath when it all came off. And it was kindness. It was love. It was 8 billion people turning toward each other in the dark. That was what was at the bottom of us. Not the fearful animal the arbiters expected. Not the violent, scrabbling survival thing. Just care. Just the deep human need to take care of each other that turned out to be stronger than fear, stronger than despair, stronger even than the certainty of death. We spent the rest of our lives knowing that about ourselves. That's what changed, really. Not that aliens exist, though they do. Not that we're part of a wider galaxy, though we are. What changed was that we found out what we are. We found out that the best version of us, the version that only comes out at the very end when everything else is stripped away, that version was real, was always there, was the truest thing about us. And once you know that about yourself, you can't unknow it. You spend the rest of your life trying to be, on the ordinary days, the thing you discovered you were on the last one. I'm an old man now. It's been a long time since that Tuesday. The world is different. We're out among the stars now, part of the great community, welcomed by an ancient race of judges who no longer judge, who spend their long existence now helping young species become what they can be instead of ending them for what they fear they are. We did that. Earth did that. 8 billion frightened people on one ordinary Tuesday, given a day to die, changed the whole galaxy by refusing to spend that day being anything less than the best of themselves. But that's not the part I tell my grandchildren. When they ask me about that day, and they always ask, everyone asks, it's the most famous day in human history, I don't tell them about the arbiters or the judgment or the galaxy that changed. I tell them about the coffee shop that made free coffee, about the chef who cooked everything he had and gave it away, about the doctors and nurses who left their families to tend strangers, about the teenagers carrying the old man's groceries, and the businesswoman sharing her lunch on the curb, and the hospital full of people who came in to work on the last day of the world. I tell them about my mother, saying she wasn't as afraid as she thought she'd be, because look at us. Look at everyone. Look how good we turned out to be when it mattered most. Because that's the real story. Not that we were judged and found worthy. That when the whole galaxy was watching and hope was gone and the end was certain and there was nothing left to gain, we turned to each other. We took care of each other. We chose 8 billion times over to make each other's last day a little less lonely, a little less frightened, a little more held. They gave us one final warning. They told us we had one day, and nothing we could do would change our fate. And we couldn't change our fate. They were right about that. There was nothing we could do to save ourselves. So we spent the day saving each other instead. And it turned out that was the thing, the only thing that could save us all.